Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Storytime. If you remember last week, we began the book, The Apple and the Arrow. And it was about this young boy. We learned about him and we met him. He lives in the mountains in a colony. And he is shooting his bow and he wants to be just like his dad. And do you remember that the next day, in the morning before he went to sleep, he was going to go to town to Altdorf with his father. So let's see what happens when they go to Altdorf. Chapter 2 is called Faith. Wake up, son, and dress quickly. We are going to Altdorf together. William Tell's deep voice awakened Walter. He jumped from his bed as he remembered his father's promise of the night before. Soon, father and son were tramping down the rough trail to Burr Glen. They passed through the tiny hamlet as William Tell nodded to right and left. Walter nodded too, for he knew almost every child and dog of the village. Soon the two Tells were on the downward path again. The sun was just rising. When we get into Altdorf, son, said the father, keep by me until I say you may play with the children. I will visit the tanner's shop and trade for something for you, your mother. These skins on my back are worth something. She did not wish me to go to town today, for she is fearful that I might talk too much or too loudly. You know the secret we must keep. Walter nodded. We will keep it together, you and I, added Tell. He was in good spirits, as he always was when he went to Altdorf. Now they entered the ever-narrowing valley. It was fun to sing and shout and then listen to the sounds of their voices echo ever more faintly. Tell's strong, dark legs moved along so fast that Walter could not sing much. He was so out of breath from running. Then as the trail curved, Walter pointed to a cave in the hillside where lived a monk well-lived by the people of the land of Uri. He said, Father, it must be lonely for Brother Klaus to live all by himself in that dark place and just pray all the time. Perhaps it would be for you, son, replied his father, but Klaus seems happy. When any one of the mountain folk is ill or without bread, Klaus comes to comfort him. When a woman loses her husband or a mother her child, Klaus is there to pray with her. All men, Walter, do not like to do the same thing. Some like to hunt, others to fight, and still others to till the soil. Klaus is a man of God, and I am sure he is happy even if he lives alone in that dark cave yonder. Soon Walter saw the old roofs of Altdorf and the stone towers of Zwinguri, Gessler's castle. Then Tell's happy mood changed. Walter heard him mutter, that knave, as busy as a rat in a wheat rick. The towers grow higher each day. Soon Gessler will live there and spy upon all that we do and put free men behind iron bars. Walter said nothing. He was waiting eagerly to see the sign that hung from the roof of Baron Inn. His father usually stopped at the inn as they neared the place. Walter, to his surprise, saw his own grandfather, Walter First, standing before the inn as if he were really waiting for them. Walter loved his fun-making old grandfather, and he ran to him, pulling on his cane. Well, well, bless my old eyes, what brings you two to Altdorf this cold day? Asked the older man. It's going to rain, too. Why are you not herding the goats? Walter and you, William, hunting for deer or for fox? Tell winked, and in a low voice answered, perhaps the same thing that brings you here first, which made grandfather smile. Come in and let us drink together then, and Walter too. He is growing up, the lad, said grandfather First, looking down at the boy. As the three entered the low door of the old inn, Tell stooped, for he was a big man. Walter followed and ran to the hearth to warm his cold hands. The men sought a dark corner of the room where they might talk and not be overheard. Soon a maidservant brought 3 brown mugs of cider on a tray. Walter joined his father and grandfather and slowly sipped the delicious drink. He was sorry when he could see the bottom of the mug and there was no more cider. The grown-ups were talking about things he did not understand, and he twisted and he fidgeted on the hard bench, hoping his father would buy another mug of cider for him. But his father just glanced down at him and said, "You are restless, Walter. Why don't you find the bear you are always talking about? And the eagle." As he said this, he placed a forefinger on his mouth. Walter knew what that meant. He must keep the secret. Smiling, Walter ran through the room. The bear was prancing up and down in his cage in a never-ending trot, swinging his head from side to side. He must hate that narrow cage, thought Walter. Village children were teasing the bear. They stuck branches of trees through the bars, hoping the wild animal might tear the branches with his wicked-looking claws and thus frighten them. But the unhappy bear was used to children and paced his cage, thinking his own gloomy thoughts. Then Walter watched a captured eagle in another cage. He was perched on the dead branches of a tree. His eyes were shut and his tail feathers were falling out. He looked so sad and so old that Walter was sorry for him. For often as he was herding in the mountains, the boy had watched great, handsome eagles floating high in the heavens, carried ever upward by strong air currents. This old fellow must be dreaming of his mountain tops, thought Walter sadly. The boy wandered around the building to the front door, when suddenly he saw his father and grandfather step from the inn. His father looked very angry. Even his grandfather did not smile as Walter ran up to him. "Come at once, son. Let us go," was all that his father had commanded. "Remember, quiet, and stay beside me." "Yes," Walter answered, wondering at his father's change of mood. They passed through a narrow way between high houses, and soon the village square or marketplace opened before them. Walter saw the familiar fountain in the center of the square, but today 2 soldiers were beside it. One of them, an old fellow, was munching on an apple. The other soldier was whittling on a stick with his dagger. They looked tired and bored. Then Walter noticed a long pole set in the ground beside the fountain. He had never seen that before. On the top of the pole fluttered a velvet hat with a feather in it, such a hat as Walter had often seen well-born people wear. He wondered why no children were playing in the fountain. No dogs lay in the dirt. No women came with water jars to draw water and to gossip together. Suddenly a well-dressed villager passed by and nodded to the soldiers, doffing his cap and bending his knee to the hat on the pole. Walter felt his father's hand stiffen against his and heard him mutter, "Traitor." Nevertheless, William Tell walked proudly on, looking neither to the left or the right. Never did a man carry himself more nobly. His great bow hung from one massive shoulder. He walked with the dignity of a great king. Past the fountain he strode. Walter clinging to him past the soldiers, past the pole with the hat aloft, as if he did not see any one of them. Suddenly Walter heard the younger soldier shout, "Stop you! You dunce over there! Are you blind? See that hat on the pole, you? That's the hat of Austria, the ducal hat." But father and son walked on unheeding. Soon the soldier munching the apple grabbed his spear and ran toward the mountaineer, yelling, "You knave! You blockhead! Bow to that hat, or I'll run you through with this," and he lowered his great spear. Only then did William Tell stop and eye the soldier fiercely as he shouted, "Hat, you dolt! What hat? I see no hat. I have business with the tanner." Tell's words made the soldiers very angry. One yelled, "Bend your knee to that hat, or we will crush your skull like a filbert, you and your filthy brat." The great mountaineer took one more step forward without replying, but the shouting of the soldiers had brought many townsfolk into the square. His way was blocked by soldiers with spears and by shouting people. Suddenly a guard blew on his bugle. Almost at once the marketplace was full of men, women, dogs, children. Other soldiers streamed in from narrow streets to join the crowd, and Walter and his father were surrounded by a mob of people. "Now for the last time, fool, bow before the ducal hat of Austria. Show you are a loyal subject of our governor Gessler. Bow, you lout," shouted a soldier. The name of Gessler seemed to make Tell even more rebellious. He laughed in defiance as Walter clung to him and shrank back from the lowered spears of the soldiers. "Go to the devil, you braggarts," he cried. "I am a man of peace. Why should I bow before a silly hat? A hat is not a lord. A hat is a thing of rags and feathers. It is nothing to bow down before." The rugged mountaineer held his son's hand tightly and shouted these words so that all heard. The townsfolk milled around the soldiers in a dense crowd. Walter heard some of them curse the guards, call them rats and knaves and dirt and dross. Angry words flew like birds from people's mouths as they shouted at the soldiers. "Holy Mary," said one villager. "Poor wretch, he'll get it now," added another. "Take your hands from me," commanded Tell as the guard seized him. "I have done no wrong. Take your hands from me, I say. I will not bow before that filthy hat. We've had enough of bowing and scraping in the land of Uri. Next thing you'll command us to bow before you, you bullies." As they heard his insolent words, 3 angry soldiers grabbed the mountain man and pinned back his arms. "We dare you to insult the governor thus, you herder of goats." A bugle sounded again, and the crowd scattered as mounted knights galloped into the marketplace. "Out of our way, you dumb brutes! Out of our way!" they commanded. Walter, almost in tears now, glanced up at them, and then he saw Gessler, the governor. Gessler. It could be no one else. The knight wore fine clothing and rode a beautiful and spirited horse, but Walter thought he looked evil in spite of his grandeur. "What goes on here?" demanded Gessler. The crowd was now deathly quiet. "Oh, so it is you, William Tell, the man of the mountains," jeered Gessler, seeing his soldiers hold the bowmen by the arms. "In trouble again, I see. For what do my men now hold you so tightly, you herder of goats?" The mountaineer did not reply. Then a soldier spoke. "He will not bow before the ducal hat, my lord." "Oh, so he is too fine to bow before the hat of Albrecht of Austria, is he? Tell the windbag bow, I say, before your betters, or we will run you through," warned Gessler. Tell was silent. He did not move. He looked at Gessler, and his eyes were like black coals, burning with hatred. Walter trembled, but he held himself proudly like his father. "So you have no tongue in that filthy mouth now? Who are your friends, Tell? There must be more like you in your mountains. Speak, or you will be sorry." Now the great bowman was really angry. He bellowed like a mad bull. The people could hear every word he said. "I will not bend my knee before a hat. I will bow only to those more truly noble than I, men of gentle birth, wise men, the man of God and the good Lord himself. I am a man of peace. I will not bend my knee before a hat of rags and feathers. A hat is nothing to worship. A well-born man, a noble? Well, that's something else." How angry Gessler became at these words. He knew that Tell was jeering at his common birth. Tell was shouting his meanness to the whole village of Altdorf. Tell was insulting him. "Oh, so you are too fine to bow before your betters," snarled Gessler, white with fury. Then a sly look came into his face as he glanced sharply down at Walter, clinging to his father and hiding his face. "Who is that brat that clings cravenly to you, Tell?" asked Gessler. "My son, Walter, my elder son," replied Tell, looking at Walter and pressing his hand. "Is that your only son, braggart?" asked Gessler. "No, I have another son, Rudolf by name. I see you have your crossbow with you, Tell. I have heard it said you are a good bowman, the best in the canton of Uri. Is that true?" "I know not if it is true," answered Tell modestly. "There are many good bowmen in Uri, but some folk have said so." A townsman shouted, "Tell is the best of us all." "Let us see then how good a bowman you really are, lout." "Take that cowardly boy, men, and place him against yon linden tree. Put an apple on his head. Tell, if you can shoot the apple from your son's head, you shall go free. But if any harm comes to the boy, or you miss the apple, you will both die, shouted the governor. A gasp of horror floated through the crowd as Walter heard people cry, "The wretch! Knave!" But Gessler only smiled an evil smile as he pointed to the tree. At last Tell found his voice. "You cannot ask this of me, governor," he pleaded. "This is an innocent lad, my firstborn. He has done no harm to anyone." "But I thought you were such a great bowman, Tell," retorted the governor. "I see you are just a bag of wind with the face of a lion and the heart of a deer." At these stinging words, Walter shouted in his high boyish voice so that all heard, "Father, I am not afraid. I will stand at the linden tree, and they need not bind me. I will stand as still as a rock. You will hit the apple, Father. You always hit the chamois right in the heart. Shoot, Father, for I am not afraid." "See the boy, Gessler, how he believes in his father," shouted a woman shrilly. The soldiers seized Walter and bound him to the linden tree, while mothers clutched their children to them fiercely, as if to shield them from the evil bailiff. Walter stood silently as a guard placed a large apple on his head. He could see the townsfolk brandishing sticks and threatening the knights. A boy threw a stone and a horse reared. Gessler commanded, "Quiet, you people of Altdorf, quiet!" Then looking down at Tell, he said, "This is your chance, fool, to show how skilled you are with the bow." The soldiers freed the mountaineer. He slipped his bow from his shoulder and raised it. He placed the arrow. Then, standing quietly, he gazed at his son, tied to the linden tree. Suddenly a monk, his head lowered, walked slowly toward Gessler. As he reached the governor, he raised his head. "Governor," he pleaded, "this is a simple man of the mountain. He knows not what he does. He means no harm. He loves his son, as all good men love their sons. Do not, I pray you, but put him to this test of skill. Take counsel with your knights. Tell is not a dastardly fellow, only an unlettered one. By the Holy Mary, do not do this cruel thing." But Gessler only scowled at the monk and replied, "Father, I must do this. I must prick this windbag. The people must obey their earthly masters as they do their heavenly master." The holy man withdrew in silence, fingering his rosary and praying. William Tell knelt on the ground. He raised his heavy crossbow again to his shoulder and took careful aim. Not a sound was heard. Even the dogs stopped barking, the horses prancing. The mountaineer was about to press the trigger of his crossbow when the sight of his slender son standing so quietly at the linden tree overcame him. He put down his bow and, groaning aloud, he pleaded, "My Lord, have pity. Spare my son. I cannot do this to an innocent, trusting child. I cannot. Have pity on us, my Lord." "Oh, ho, ho, so it's my Lord at last. Tell, so you cannot? The strong mountain man cannot? He trembles like the leaves of that linden tree yonder. See how pale he is. What a rare sight. Tell, the great windbag is trembling like a frightened woman. Where is your boasted skill with the bow, Tell?" As Walter heard these bitter words, he shouted above the din, "Shoot, Father, shoot! I am not afraid. God is watching over us." Walter's voice seemed to bring back his father's courage. He took another arrow from his quiver and slipped it into his girdle. Then he quickly raised the heavy crossbow to his shoulder as muscles rippled on his brown arms. He sighted the apple on his son's head. He pulled back the drawstring. Many of the townsfolk were now on their knees praying. Gessler eyed every move that Tell made. Then, with a grim smile and almost without warning, the great bowman quickly and surely squeezed the trigger of his faithful bow. The arrow sped like a ray of light. Walter suddenly felt the apple on his head split, tremble, and then fall to the ground. The nose of the arrow buried itself in the old gnarled trunk of the ancient linden tree. A great sigh of relief, like a sudden wind, passed over the heads of the people. Then all at once sounds of jubilation burst forth as the people saw that Walter was safe from harm. "The mighty Tell! Tell the hero!" the people shouted, surging toward the bowman as he stopped there, his dark body glistening with sweat, proud and strong. The people tried to reach him to carry him on their shoulders like the hero he was, but the soldiers barred their way. Women cried, others prayed, while still others shouted. Their happiness made Gessler even more angry. When guards unbound Walter, he picked up the 2 halves of the apple and ran toward his father, crying, "See, father, you cut the apple in 2 pieces." A soldier blew on a horn to quiet the happy crowd, and in the silence, Walter heard Gessler shout, "You did hit the apple, Tell, and not your son. You are a bowman, as men say." "But what if a second arrow thrust so quickly into your girdle?" William Tell, feeling suddenly weak and tired, just looked at the governor and said, "That is the custom of bowmen, governor." "Answer me, Tell. I want the truth. Why was the second arrow hidden in your girdle? Tell me, and I will spare your life." William Tell was a simple, trustful man of the mountains. He believed Gessler's words, for the word of a knight was supposed to be truth itself. So he replied honestly, "Had I killed my son, governor, this arrow would have found your heart." Gessler, suddenly rushed with anger. "Oh, so that is the truth, at last," he growled. "I promised to let you live, and that I will do on my word as a knight, but I will put you where you will never again see the sun rise in the mountains, nor the moon set behind the peaks. Drag this man to the boat on the lake, soldiers. We will take him to the dungeon of the castle of Küssnacht." Walter was pushed from his father's side as the angry people of Altdorf followed the soldiers dragging Tell away. The boy was knocked down in the dense crowd and lay in the dirt crying. Then at last the shouting and the noise faded away as Walter got slowly to his feet. Through his tears he saw the marketplace was now completely empty. The pole and the ducal hat lay on the ground. Then Walter saw grandfather first hastening toward him. The old man clasped the crying boy to him and said soothingly, "Don't cry, Walter. We will go home. Mother is waiting for you." "But grandfather," gulped Walter when he could talk once more. "What will they do with father? Are they going to kill him now after he hit the apple? Gessler promised not to." "Will they put him in prison?" "Quiet, lad," soothed his grandfather. "Your father is a brave man. They will not dare to kill him now. The people would revolt. Instead, they may keep him a while in prison. But never fear, you will see him again soon." Walter and his grandfather half ran and half walked up the mountain trail toward home. Great dark clouds gathered overhead, and soon the rain fell in torrents. They reached home at last, wet and shivering. When Walter saw his mother, he ran and buried his face in her skirts like a small boy, for he was frightened and very, very tired. Hedwig put him to bed, and while grandfather first told her the story of the sad day, he sobbed himself to sleep. Well now, we do not know what will happen to William Tell. We might find out next week in chapter 3, entitled Waiting. William Tell and Walter both had great courage in the midst of a very, very scary day, and we will see next week what happens as we continue to read The Apple and the Arrow.